I would say that we are all waiting on a sunny day after the ending to that Chiefs game last night. My goodness. I'll tell you right now, though, I'm not nearly as upset with the refs as I am with the boneheaded decisions that we continue to see week in, week out from this Chiefs team. I mean, I was there last night, was at the game. And, on TV, we don't see the flags oftentimes as quickly as you may have seen them, or we don't see them as quickly as the game as you may have seen them on TV. But last night, when Travis Kelce laterals it to Kadarius Toney, and he runs in for what appears to be the go-ahead touchdown with a minute left, the place is going absolutely nuts. And then, of course, everyone realizes there's a flag on the play. Offsides is called on Kadarius Toney on the offense, which is very unusual. And obviously there was plenty of expletives being directed towards the officiating crew, which had itself a rough night. I don't deny that for a second. That being said, this team is not good enough this year to make up for fumbles, interceptions, and dumb penalties. And that's what we keep learning week in, week out about the Kansas City Chiefs. That was it. So as I'm watching this after the game last night and looking at some of the reaction, we have never seen Patrick Mahomes just go up to the podium after the game and lay into the refs like he did last night. And a lot of people are like, yeah, Patrick, it's about time, man. See, this is a guy who deep down is frustrated with his wide receivers. He has to be. But he can't get up to the podium and say that. So last night there was an easy target with the officials, so we decided to use them as a target, and here's what the quarterback had to say.
It's obviously tough to swallow. Not only for me, but just for football in general. Just to take away greatness like that. For a guy like Travis to make a play like that, and who knows if we win. But as I know as fans, you want to see the guys on the field decide the game. And that's why last week I didn't say anything about the flag. They didn't get called on the Marquez. And so, they're human, man. They make mistakes. But, it's every week we're talking about something, and all I can do is go out there and give everything I have, and I'm proud of the guys because that's what we did, and it was a great football game that ended – another great football game that just ended like that. It's just tough to swallow.
There's one person on that play who took away greatness from the Chiefs. It was not the official who threw the flag. It was Kadarius Toney. That's who took away greatness on that play. The dude, you couldn't even see the football when you look at the replay. The dude was like a full foot ahead of the football before the play got off. Now, for those of you saying that the NFL never calls this, that is generally true. I'm sitting there in the stadium trying to figure out with my dad, who was at the game with me, what the heck is offensive offsides? When's the last time that was called? So they said it last night on Sunday Night Football during halftime that they've called offensive offsides 11 times this season in the NFL. Now, that's not a lot, but last year they called it twice. In 2021, it was called once during the entire season. So there's two ways to look at it. One, yeah, it's still not called all that frequently. Number two is they're keeping an eye on it, and it's been called 5.5 times as many times as last year, and there's still 5 weeks to go in the season. So this is something that people need to look out for. Players, coaches, the whole thing need to look out for. And the Chiefs did not. And Kadarius Toney, who, by the way, is standing on the left side of the line and is looking to his right. He's looking to his right at the football. It's got to be pretty obvious to him. Geez, it looked like a good foot in front of the football here. I better get myself behind the line of scrimmage, or at least on the line of scrimmage. And he never did it. And this is case in point, once again, what you have with this team. A group of wide receivers who continues to get in its own way. Whether it's dropping passes, boneheaded offsides decisions, fumbles last night. Rashee Rice had a fumble. You can't keep overcoming these kinds of mistakes. They don't have the talent to do it. And it's another game where the Chiefs can't crack 20 points in a game. I mean, if you told me they would have held Josh Allen to 20 points last night, I would have said, great, sign me up for that. But, the Chiefs are not able to crack the 20-point mark with consistency. If you look at it, during these games when they lost 4 of their last 6, they've only cracked the 20-point mark 3 times, and one of them was barely. Broncos game, they scored 9, 21 against the Dolphins, 17 against the Eagles, 31 against the Raiders, 19 against the Packers, and 17 against the Bills. They continue to struggle in that department. Meantime, you have Patrick Mahomes, who was still upset with everything that was said last night, or everything that happened last night with the officiating. And here's what else he had to say.
The call, man, just in that moment, I mean, it's not even for myself or for me. It's just I know how much everybody puts into this game, and for it to happen on a flag, change the outcome of a game. In that moment, I mean, I've played 7 years, never had offensive offsides called. I mean, that's elementary school. We talk about. I mean, you point to the ref, do all that different type of stuff, and it doesn't get called. And if it does, they warn you. And there was no warning throughout the entire game. And then you wait till there's a minute left in the game to make a call like that. It's tough, man. It's lost for words, man. It's tough because regardless if we win or lose, man, just for it to end with another game and we're talking about the refs, man, it's just not what we want for the NFL and for football.
I understand what he's saying, but once again, his frustrations are being misdirected at the officials. Yeah, there was, of course, the non-PI call against Marquez Valdes-Scantling at the end of that Packers game late last week. But the consistent theme for the Chiefs' struggles is not the officiating. It's the offense. It is. Even Mahomes. And I don't think certainly he's not the problem by any stretch of the imagination. But he's lost a little bit of that confidence, swagger, accuracy that he's had in recent years. And I don't blame him with the wide receiver core he's working with. But that's where his frustration should be. With his own wide receivers, with, by the way, a front office and a coaching staff who thought that this group of guys was capable of being a defending Super Bowl champion group of wide receivers. I mean, run down the list. Kadarius Toney. We know the boneheaded decision from last night, but he has not proven to be a solid wide receiver. Sky Moore is officially or unofficially a bust, however you want to call it. We know what Marquez Valdes-Scantling has done or not done since his big drop against the Eagles, which would have won them the game. Go on and on and on down the list. Travis Kelce is incredible. He's a Hall of Famer. He can't do it all on his own. He just can't. And yes, Rashee Rice had a very good game, and he looks like he's going to be around for a long time. I hope he is. But he did have a fumble when the Chiefs were rolling through a drive in that, third quarter. So all in all, the issues remain internal with this team. They are 8-5. They will still host a playoff game and will win this division, I believe. But they're going to have to go on the road if they're going to get back to a Super Bowl. And at this point in time, that's not looking like it's going to be the case. 913-408-7957 as we roll on a Monday morning on KCMO. Kendall Gammon will be here top of next hour, former Chiefs player, to talk about what he saw from this game last night at Arrowhead Stadium. Coming up, movements in higher education as that continues to unravel. The only thing unraveling more than the Chiefs right now is higher education. We'll explain that next on KCMO 95.7 FM. Well, heads are starting to roll in higher education. Most notably over the weekend, if you missed it, the Penn president, University of Pennsylvania, president and the chairman of the board have both resigned in the wake of the insane anti-Semitic testimony that took place on Capitol Hill last week. So Liz McGill is out as president at UPenn. She will hang on until an interim president is appointed. And board chairman Scott Bach, he also sent a letter to the board saying that he's done as of Saturday afternoon. So these two are both done over the weekend. And what this is really about is not about UPenn. Most of us are never going to step foot on UPenn's campus. I did once when I was at Villanova, and I'm still paying the price for it because it was such a disturbing atmosphere to be in. I'm just kidding. It actually is a beautiful campus. Unfortunately, it's gone totally insane. Of course, it is the alma mater of none other than Donald J. Trump. So, there is a connection, of course, to many presidents, as is the case for a lot of our Ivy League institutions. But unfortunately, they have completely lost their minds. And we saw that on display late last week when Elise Stefanik did one of the best grillings that you'll ever see on Capitol Hill. When she had on 3 Ivy League presidents and she grilled them on anti-Semitism and what is happening on their respective campuses. And they were just unable to sit there and point out the obvious from MIT, UPenn, and Harvard that, yes, they have a problem on their campuses. And if it was any other group, if people were protesting the Jewish people on these college campuses, and if you replace Jewish with Black, Asian, Latino, fill in the blank, there would be uproars. The campuses would do something about it. But because it's Jews, they're not. And that was on full display last week, and now people are paying the price. So the bigger question here on a Monday morning is the micro is what's happening specifically to these presidents and these universities. The macro is something that we've been seeing as a trend for the last several years. Americans are losing faith in the value of college. This article from the New York Times I'm reading with that very headline comes from September 5th of this year. A month and 2 days before the awful attacks, the horrific attacks in Israel from the Hamas terror group that, of course, has led to this insane amount of anti-Semitism appearing on these college campuses. So this is once again a trend that has been happening, but over the last month or two, what we've seen is people waking up to just how radical these college campuses are, and not just the campuses themselves, but the people who are the faces of these campuses, the people who run these institutions. We knew it was the case. It was kind of like during COVID when we knew that schools were getting further and further away from just teaching math, science, English, everything else that they should be learning, and we're getting more into the woke DEI nonsense. And then COVID hits, and parents are suddenly sitting over their kids' shoulders, and they're like, what do you learn all day? Well, that's what is happening right now with higher education. We all knew where this had been trending, but suddenly seeing full-blown anti-Semitic rallies on college campuses, seeing college students who are Jews having to hide and barricade themselves in library closets because of protests happening on their campuses, is opening up a lot of people's eyes to the fact that this is what these campuses have become. So September 5th, the New York Times asked the question, Americans are losing faith in the value of college. Whose fault is that? And they write here, a decade or so ago, Americans were feeling pretty positive about higher education. Public opinion polls in the early 2010s all told the same story. In one survey, 86% of college graduates said the college had been a good investment. In another, 74% of young adults said a college education was very important. In a third, 60% of Americans said that colleges and universities were having a positive impact on the country. At that time, 96% of parents who identified as Democrats said they expected their kids to attend college, only to be outdone by Republican parents, 99% of whom said they expected their kids to go to college. What's happened since then? A precipitous decline in the amount of kids who are going to college. Now, you may look at that number and say, this is horrific. Kids aren't going to college like they used to. Well, that's true. The percentage of young adults who said that a college degree is very important fell to 41% over the last decade from a high of 74%. Only about a third of Americans now say they have a lot of confidence in higher education. According to Gen Z, 45% of them say a high school diploma is all you need to ensure financial security. So what is going on here? What is happening? You are seeing a deep level of mistrust in higher education. We know the economy is changing. We know that now, how much can you learn on YouTube, by the way? No matter what you want to do in life. You want to learn how to do code, SEO, you can teach yourself. Heck, you can, of course, teach yourself, air quotes, blue-collar jobs. I use air quotes because, of course, blue-collar jobs are oftentimes paying more than white-collar jobs these days. But you can teach yourself certain blue-collar skills on YouTube. But instead, what are you going to do? You're going to go sit in a 4-year institution, put yourself in tens of thousands of dollars in debt potentially, to have some clown indoctrinate you, or try to lay white guilt, if you are white, on a silver platter for you. Take a hike and stick it where the sun don't shine while you're at it there, big guy. That's what's happening on these college campuses. And people have had enough, and they're realizing it. And now, in the wake of the last couple of months and the attacks by Hamas on Israel, and seeing how truly radical some of these college campuses are, people are waking up even further. So higher education has itself a problem. And its problem remains the government. The minute the government got involved, the minute the woke mindset infiltrated these college campuses, is also the minute that it became wildly unaffordable, which we've only seen on steroids the last couple of decades. So people are realizing I should not be, and I do not need to be going into massive amounts of debt to receive the indoctrination education that these colleges now pursue on a seemingly daily basis. And there's a good thing about that, but it also means the reckoning in higher education is just starting. And unless they reverse course and reverse course quickly, it's not going to look good for them. Coming up, we'll tell you what we've got going on as a radio station tonight in 10 hours. That's going to be fun. Plus, states are dividing amongst red and blue. We'll get to it next. I wish I could say happy Monday, but after the ending of that game last night, it's hard to say happy Monday. But it's Monday, and we're here on KCMO Talk Radio, now on 95.7 FM. Welcome in. So for years, we oftentimes had concerns that anybody moving from California, from New York, from even throw in Illinois, and was coming to, let's say, Kansas or Missouri, but this could be true for anywhere, Texas, anywhere in the heartland, anyone who is coming this way from one of the traditionally blue coastal states, we were like, oh boy, here they come. They're coming, and they're bringing their politics with them. And we wish they would just leave their terrible politics at home, where they came from. Well, it looks like that's not what's happening anymore. There's no doubt that, whether it's Californians leaving or New Yorkers going south or whatever it might be, for many years, they were leaving because, well, they were retiring. They wanted an easier way of life. They wanted maybe slightly better weather, whatever it might be. And yes, those people would oftentimes bring their politics with them. But now what we're seeing is people leaving blue states for red states, and they're people who are red voters, and they're sick of being in blue states. That's what's happening now, and that's the trend that we've seen since COVID. And there's some new data that suggests that's exactly what's happening here. So I want to bring this up because, listen, I know for years, and we've had the conversation here on this show, hey, if you're in Kansas or you're in Missouri and you're coming from California, leave your crappy politics where you came from. There's a reason you're leaving California. And by the way, that was always and still is a good message. Like, we definitely should still remind people coming from California to anywhere else in the country that you're leaving that dump and that hellhole for a reason. So please don't even think about voting for similar policies or people with similar policies when you move to your brand new state. Please think twice because you're leaving for a reason. But new data, Gem State data shows the following here. Thousands of conservative-leaning Washington residents fled the deep blue state for neighboring Idaho. And they're outpacing the registered Republicans who are currently in the state. How about this? Data published by the Idaho Secretary of State's office shows that out of nearly 119,000 people who recently moved to the state, 65% registered as Republicans. Only 12% registered as Democrats. That outpaces the 58% of registered Republicans currently in the state. My goodness. Who would have seen that coming? The article also goes on the note here. Out of the roughly 20,000 Americans who moved from Washington state to Idaho, 62% of those registered as Republicans, compared to 12% as Democrats, 24% as unaffiliated, and 2% as other. And this is something that you're seeing, by the way, in other parts of the country as well. Out of the 40,000 people who left California for Idaho, 75% of them registered as Republicans. Only 10% of the California pool in Idaho registered as Democrats, 14% unaffiliated, 2% as other. So what you're seeing here is you are seeing Republicans overwhelmingly being the ones who are leaving their blue states. And they're going to places, in this case, Idaho for this example, but they're going all over the country. They're going to Nevada, they're going to Arizona, they're going to Texas. I mean, this trend's been going on for a while, but obviously it's picked up over the last couple of years. But this is one of those things, the national implications on this are as follows. A more divided America. Now, I don't think that's healthy, but that's the outcome of this. It's not my job right now to determine whether or not that's healthy, but that's what's happening. People literally don't want to live next door, no pun intended. They don't want to live next door to somebody who does not have the same worldview as them. So they're taking their chances and they're going to states that are more likely to represent their beliefs. That's what's happening here. And normally I might, a few years ago, I might look back on this and I might say, yeah, you know what? That's fine. That's good. People want to be in states where they're more likely, not guaranteed, but more likely to have neighbors and neighborhoods where people are like-minded. Because, heck, that's what I did. I mean, I'm originally, as many of you know by now, I grew up in New Jersey. Now, I grew up in New Jersey when it was, I don't know about a swing state, but it wasn't a deep blue state like it is like right now. I mean, heck, the state did have Chris Christie as its governor for 2 terms in the last 15 to 20 years. So it's not like it was always a crazy deep blue state. It's just become that. But I lived in Oklahoma for 2 years. I loved the makeup of that state. I was in New York for 5 years doing stuff at CBS News Radio and Fox News Radio. And then we came back out here. And part of that was, due to lifestyle potential, right? And like-mindedness when it comes to people in and around the state. So I'm part of that group. But I do wonder if red states get redder and blue states get bluer, how we continue to function as a country. Or if the division is only going to grow. Because ideally, I think we all, no matter how you feel, we should want the division to lessen in America. But if we get redder red states and bluer blue states, well, I'm all about a red state. When it comes to the national agenda of a country, we will continue to lose it if red states get redder and blue states get bluer. We're just not going to be able to function. And there is a downside to that as a country because we'll lose our American identity. And frankly, we'll just identify more as our states. And I know that that's what the founders wanted. And I understand that. I'm all about states' rights and states having as much power as possible. But the downside to that, when it comes to trying to function as a country with a federal government that is as bloated and big and powerful as our federal government is, that's what concerns me because this federal government is way bigger and way more powerful than our founders ever expected it or intended it to be. And that's where you come away with this real concern in terms of what a red or red state means and a blue or blue state means for the future of the country. 913-408-7957 as we kick it off on a Monday. Jim is out east on KCMO. What's happening there, Jimbo?
Hey, Pete, let me give you the devil's advocate on this. What if it's a plot from the Democrats to infiltrate the Republican Party?
Oh, you mean I'm not laughing at you. I'm just laughing at, I hadn't thought about that.
Because their policies then would be reflected within the Republican Party.
Well, that would be a very coordinated effort. So you're suggesting that these people are really Democrats. They're moving to red states. They're registering as Republicans to try to toy with the Republican Party in its elections.
I'm just saying it might be that case.
Maybe it's the case with I can't answer it for certain either way. I just don't buy it for two reasons. One, it would have to be highly coordinated effort, and not saying they're not capable of it, but what it seems to me is it's just a lot of Republicans in some of these blue states throwing their hands up and saying, I've had enough.
Well, I understand that. I'm just trying to play devil's advocate here, because just because they sign a piece of paper saying I'm Republican now, doesn't mean their policies change.
Well, listen, I can't deny it, Jim. It's a great question to bring up. I can't say with absolute certainty there aren't some of those people, but I can speak anecdotally to a little bit of it. And some of the people that I've, met in this area who have left blue states and, some of the trends that we've seen around the country on this front, I do think that it is mostly Republicans who have just said, I'm done with California, Illinois, New York, fill in the blank. But I can say, there's not a small percentage of that, Jim, that might be just saying, you know what, I'm going to go to the state and I'm going to register as a Republican. And then, you know what, let the chips fall where they may, even though they're really Democrats. I don't know. Doesn't seem to be the majority, though. I'd put that out there, Jim. 913-408-7957. That is the text line as well here on KCMO Talk Radio. Happy Monday morning. Still licking our wounds from that Chiefs loss. Kendall Gammon will be here just after the top of the hour. And tonight, 4 to 6 p.m., myself and Ray Stevens are going to be out at the Eddie Pub. It's really Ray's event. It's Ray's first event since he got on the air here 3 months ago on KCMO Talk Radio. So I'll be out there with him. We're going to be at the Yeti Pub in Overland Park off 151st Street. So RSVP. There's still a handful of openings if you want to RSVP. The RSVP link is at kcmotalkradio.com. So I hope we'll see many of you out there. We still have a few open spots if you want to stop by. Yeti Pub, they got a beer and wing special, 4 to 6 p.m. More of a happy hour. Come out, hang out. We'll have a good time. kcmotalkradio.com is where you RSVP, and we'll get to more of that and give you some of the details throughout the morning here on KCMO. Kendall Gammon will be here at the top of the hour. Come on, you want to do it. You got to get your mind off that game from yesterday, and you want to join us 4 to 6 this afternoon. Ray Stevens' first event since he came on here with us on KCMO Talk Radio. We're going to be having his event tonight. Looking forward to that. Come on out, 4 to 6, happy hour at the Yeti Pub at 151st Street in Overland Park. It's going to be a great time and a great event, and we hope that you'll join us this evening for it. Just stop on by. That's all you got to do. Way home from work or whatever it might be. It's going to be a good one. So we were talking about this before the break. It looks like what's happening in some recent data that's been unveiled is that our red states are getting redder and our blue states are getting bluer. Overwhelmingly, people who are fleeing California for states like Idaho and Washington for states like Idaho, you're seeing an overwhelming number of Republicans who are registering in these states when they're fleeing these other states. Now, we don't know if that's just unique to Idaho, right? I don't know if people are like, hey, if I'm going to Idaho, I'm obviously going to be a Republican. I think that's possible. But I also believe that since COVID, the people who are leaving places like California are people who probably have been Republicans for a period of time, but finally said, enough's enough. I got to rip the Band-Aid off. And I know that there's many of you out there who may be in our area, in Kansas or Missouri, for similar reasons. I mean, I can speak to that personally. Yes, the job brought me here, But I'm someone who had lived in Oklahoma, had lived then for 5 years in New York, working at Fox News and CBS and others, and then decided, what do we want to live around when it comes to being near as many like-minded people as possible and being in states that more represented what we believe in. And that certainly was a selling point as much as anything. Judy is in Bethany. She starts it off on KCMO. Hey, Judy, good morning.
Good morning, Pete. Okay, I have been a registered Republican all of my voting life. I left Oregon. My husband actually was born in Springfield, Missouri, but met him and married him in Oregon. After he passed away, I wanted to leave Oregon, not because Oregon was turning into a radically blue state, but because I wanted to get away from the weather, and end up moving here to Missouri after he passed away because of the weather, not because of the politics. But when I left Oregon 10 years ago, Oregon was not as radically blue as it is today. But the weather is why I left Oregon and moved here.
Now, let me ask you, do you have friends or have you kept in touch with people in Oregon who have decided to leave since you left over maybe some of the politics of that state?
Actually, it's really funny because I have met people here in Bethany that used to live in Oregon that I did not know in Oregon. And part of the reason why they left Oregon was because of the politics.
Wow.
And it's really funny.
So you've met fellow former, what are they, Oregonians, I guess, in Bethany that obviously you didn't know. It's a big state. That left since you got here for reasons more around the politics of the state.
Exactly.
Wow. And
in fact, I'm dating a guy that used to live in Portland.
Really? All right. So the dating life is doing well too, Judy. I like hearing that. That's outstanding.
Yeah, it's amazing. But yeah, and I met people that have moved from California to Texas to this area because of the politics. Mm-hmm. And they are registered Republicans, and they are leaving the area and coming to this area because they don't want to be associated with the blue, and they are Republicans, and they want to be with like-minded people.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
So, I mean, and it's really amazing to be here and see this all going on because they don't want to be with the radical blue people.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Very, very interesting, Judy. Great call. What's your boyfriend's name, by the way?
Daryl.
Daryl. All right. Make sure Daryl takes good care of you, and we'll give Daryl a shout-out here on the show. We appreciate it, Judy.
Thank you.
All right. There you go. 913-408-7957. I'm just reading through some of your texts here as well. Pete, it seems to me from my anecdotal experience within my contacts, a lot of people I know moving from California, possibly registering as Republicans, but not really knowing what it means to be Republican. California has moved so far left, anyone that's moved slightly to the right says they're a Republican, but I'm not sure they really are. Well, see, that gets into more about the Big Tent Party. I'd rather be the Big Tent Republican Party that wins and has some infighting because we're trying to figure out what the best direction is for everybody than just having the purity test of, if you're not super conservative, then you don't actually count and you're not really a Republican. You're just registering as one. I'd rather have more people registering as Republicans, right? And then trying to figure out the best way forward as a whole and having a better chance of winning elections than turning it into a purity test to see who is the most conservative person ever possible. And if you're not all the way where I'm at, well, boy, you might as well be a Democrat. I don't want to really take that approach because that creates a party of purity that also ends up losing a lot of elections. And we've done plenty of that the last few years as Republicans. So let's try to avoid that as best we can going forward. How's that sound? Sound like a good idea? Jeez, 913-408-7957. I got 30 seconds for you, Jason in Phoenix. Sorry I'm up against it, but go ahead. It's all yours.
Hey, Pete, love your show. Kansas City native. I go to Boise a lot for work. I've been going there for 20 years. And to me, Boise is now where what I say Austin, Texas was 20 years ago. I could take you to Boise cover your eyes, unmask you, and you would swear you're in parts of California. I travel for a living. And so the way the architecture is going, it looks a lot like California. I was sitting at one of my favorite little bars one afternoon, sitting there reading, and I hear something go by, and I'm like, wow, that's a Ferrari. A couple minutes later, holy cow, that's a Porsche. Holy cow, there's a McLaren. I mean, you look at what 20 years ago, it's truck, beater, nice car, nice truck.
But is it, let me ask you real quick, is it though, sure. Is it, but if they're Republicans and they're just driving Porsches, I mean, that's still different for Idaho, but it still means they're registering as Republicans, right?
Correct. Well, but if you look, I've got a friend that lives in Boise. My opinion, you look at what's getting into the school systems up there and what they're starting to allow. It's starting to trend, and that's
starting to trend.
You look at
Gotcha.
Look at Austin, Texas, 10, 15 years ago. That's where Boise is today.
Gotcha. Good stuff, Jason. Thank you, man. I'm up against it. Great call. Appreciate it. Coming up next, Kendall Gammon. We'll talk about the Chiefs game from last night. Going to be dramatic next. How fat pride became the new battleground in America's culture wars. 1 in 6 U.S. deaths are linked to obesity. But blue states are banning fat phobia with discrimination laws. This from the Daily Mail. I don't know what that even means. Like, I don't understand what it means to say we're banning fat phobia with discrimination laws. I mean, we are a nation of fat, literally. I mean, that's what we are. That's what we've become. That's what the data shows. 42% of American adults are now technically obese by the definition of the term. Now, you may argue, hey, I'm big boned, but they call me obese. Like, maybe that's true. But it's like my dad and I were at the game yesterday, at the Bills game, and, the seats are a little tight when you're there at Arrowhead. He's like, geez, a little tight around here. I'm like, the stadium was built 50 years ago, and people were smaller back then, Dad, so, it's a little tight in here, a little tight squeeze, shoulder to shoulder, that's how it goes. But the percentage of U.S. children who are obese has also quadrupled since the 1960s. It now stands around 1 in 5. What else? The result of all this obesity has crushing health problems. We've drastically increased our rates of heart disease, stroke, type 2 diabetes, and certain types of cancer, as well as a huge estimated annual medical cost of nearly $173 billion as recently as 2019. So I think any normal person would look at this and say, we've got a problem, we got to get people into shape. But now what do we do in America? Since we are a culture of victim creators, we say, no. What we need to do is turn anyone who is overweight into a victim and celebrate them for being fat. Now, I'm not here to say that you should make fun of anyone for being overweight. That's not the right thing to do. That's not how normal people should treat each other or act or anything like that. I would treat anyone who's fat the same way I would treat anyone who's skinny, anyone who's black, white. I mean, I treat someone for the person that they are. That's what we all should do. But what we don't need to do is celebrate unhealthiness. And I understand people are overweight for different reasons as well. It's not just, lack of exercise or lack of eating. Sometimes it's different health-related issues that cause the weight. Like, we get all of that. We understand all of that. That being said, what this is really about, and what you're really seeing here, is creating a new class of victims, because that's what politicians like to do. They want to turn you into a victim, because once they turn you into a victim and they create this perception that you need them to protect you, that's how they get your vote. And that's what the story is here. Because here's what's interesting. You've had cities across the country that have started passing laws aimed at preventing discrimination against the fat. writes the Daily Mail. San Francisco, Washington, D.C., and New York City among them. But what's interesting is that conservative states like West Virginia and Kentucky, who have the worst obesity problems in the country, are not pushing those laws. So how does that make any sense? You have blue states in cities that are more fit than red states who are passing laws preventing discrimination against the fat, which I don't even know what that really means. I mean, if you're so overweight, you need a, let's say, handicap ramp or something. Everyone, as I understand it, more or less legally has to have access for everybody, right? So there's already laws in place for that. I'm not even quite sure what this means when you talk about discrimination against the fat. But they're passing these laws all over the country in more progressive cities, despite the fact that these cities are less likely to have obesity problems than more red states. So that tells you it's really about politics. And what's the political gain here? That's the next question. Well, the political gain here, to tie it back to the earlier point, is to make you into a victim who needs the government and therefore must vote for said party because you need the government because now you are a victim class. And that's all nonsense. It's nonsense in most cases. This is America. This is still the country where you've got the best chance of any place in the world to get ahead, to live the American dream. And that's what excites us and, I think gets a lot of us going and waking up every day and trying to live that American dream and do better for ourselves, for our families, and everybody else. But being fat is now becoming a victim class because, by the way, they've run out of victim classes, right? I mean, everybody else who they could claim as a victim, they've already put into victim class hood. So now it's about, well, who's our next victim that we can now try to gain votes off of? Oh, overweight people. That's our next victim class. So that's at its core what this is about. It's not about actually protecting anybody. It's not about actually doing anything that makes someone's life better. It's not about that. It's just about voting. That's it. It's about power. It's about politics. And it's disturbing. No doubt about that. It's disturbing. It's completely un-American. But you know what? Power and politics will do weird things to people. And we see examples of that every single day. And wouldn't it be nice if in America what we did instead, if we had some national movement to get people in the shape? I often said during COVID, instead of closing down gyms, what we should have done in hindsight, once we realized that people who are younger and healthier were less likely to have really bad reactions to COVID, we should have had a national movement to exercise in this country, even if it meant keeping gyms open. Instead, what do? We shut them down. We told people to hide in their basements, live in fear, sit behind the computer, sit behind the screens, sit in isolation. And we should have been doing the exact opposite of that. That would have been a great opportunity for this country to turn around its obesity rate and start going in the opposite direction. But of course, our fearless leaders, and I include Republicans and Democrats in that, had no interest in going down that road. Heck, we could have had Trump on the treadmill. That would have been great. I mean, he would have loved it. But we couldn't do that. 913-408-7957 as we approach 9 o'clock here on KCMO Talk Radio on 95.7 FM. Welcome in. Thanks for being here. Going to be at Yeti Pub in Overland Park today with our guy, Ray Stevens. There's still a couple of spots to RSVP on my social media pages. Find it there. But the next story I'm going to share with you is an email I got from a listener on awful housing policy potentially coming to Kansas City. Don't miss it next. This is when I love getting emails from you, the listener, on KC. I mean, I love getting emails all the time. Even those of you that just want to, not say the nicest things. That's okay. I've got, my big boy pants on. I can handle it. But I love when I get emails from many of you who are longtime listeners of the show, and finally something that we've talked about, or not finally, but something that we've talked about, ends up having an impact in your personal life, where someone that you interact with, someone that you care about, is informed on something, courtesy of this show, And you're able to then provide us some perspective on this and what it would mean for the people that you've talked to in your lives. That's the kind of stuff that I like hearing from you on. So this comes from Kevin, and it's tied to the awful housing proposal that is on the table in Kansas City, Missouri. And we've talked a lot about this the last, week or so, right? We've had a lot of conversations around this housing policy that Kansas City, Missouri is considering that would basically say if you were a landlord in Kansas City, Missouri, you would not be able to reject someone as a tenant based on their credit history, any prior evictions, criminal background, or source of income. That's terrible policy. This is not right. This is awful policy. It's not a right-left thing. It's just terrible policy. The idea that you could not reject a potential tenant because of their criminal background is the government sticking its nose into the private sector in a place that it does not belong. Now, some will argue, as the mayor of Kansas City did on this show last week, that, we have our folks who have been jailed and imprisoned who are trying to get back on their feet, and we need to help them. I agree. We need to help them. I agree. They deserve an opportunity to live somewhere, to work somewhere, to get back on their feet. But the fact that you could potentially put a landlord in a situation where they would have to accept somebody based on a criminal history is completely un-American for a multitude of reasons. And Kansas City is going to be considering this. It's already looking like it might pass. But there's, another meeting on this tomorrow, as we understand it, at City Hall. So I got this email from a guy. His name is Kevin. And Kevin writes here, my wife and I have listened to your daily show since you first started. Thank you very much for that.
Such a nice man.
He says here, we love your show. You brought our attention to the lame-brained proposal that would prevent landlords from denying lodging to ex-cons, people who have been evicted by other landlords, deadbeats, and people with no income. A young couple that we see every Sunday at church are unique entrepreneurs. They have gradually bought homes in the Midtown Kansas City area, and they rent them out. It is the full-time job for both of them to support their young children. After church yesterday, I asked him how the new ordinance would affect them if passed. He said, first, it would force them to immediately sell all of their houses. And B, he believes it will pass because the socialists are in charge. He says here, a real-life cause and effect that will harm really good people who have been providing good quality lodging for years in Kansas City. He adds here, after years of living, after living our entire lives in KCMO, we're looking for a way out, just haven't figured out where yet. That is from Kevin through an email I got from him this morning at about 8 o'clock on KCMO. And by the way, Tony's Kansas City wrote about this over the weekend as well. Says here, Kansas City mandatory housing voucher participation is feared. Tony's Kansas City writes, this week, below the radar, there has been rising opposition against a controversial proposal crafted by tenants' rights activists and endorsed by Mayor Quinton Lucas. Tony's Kansas City writes, the Apartment Association of Kansas City opposes source of income legislation. Currently, they're reaching out to council in order to convey their concerns. Tony's Kansas City writes here, this is a big deal for a lot of reasons, but mostly because it will only serve to drive more small-time providers out of the market and further limit housing supply. Actually, Tony's Kansas City wants more affordable housing for people, and this effort seems to actively discourage home providers, especially those on the low end. Bingo, that's exactly right. That is, Tony's spot on a lot, but Tony just nailed it here with this. What you're going to do, just like my emailer, you're going to drive out the smaller mom and pop landlords who are not renting out, by the way. They're not renting out 2-light and 3-light condos. They are renting out run-of-the-mill homes or apartments or townhouses to working class people in Kansas City for the most part. And what you really should want is more mom and pop landlords creating more supply of rental housing for regular folks. Because when you increase the supply, what happens? You decrease the demand and prices, I don't want to say they come down, but they at least don't skyrocket. If the people that our listener met at church was forced to sell all their houses in Midtown Kansas City, who do you think's buying them up right now in this economy? Who's purchasing those homes? You think it's another mom and pop landlord who's going to put their neck on the line for more bad public policy to come to Kansas City, Missouri, courtesy of the KC Tenants Organization? That is, and I'm not like overstating this. I'm not just throwing this word out there to be dramatic. This KC Tenants Organization is a socialist operation. That's what they are. That's what they promote. That's what they like. That's what they do. And Kansas City, over the last couple of years, as a city council, has continued to proven to be more willing to pass legislation that the KC Tenants Organization wants them to pass. They get a budget now from the city council. They get to basically direct that money the way they see fit. And their stature and their power and their influence has only grown in this town the last couple of years. If you are a small-time landlord in Kansas City and you see this coming down the pipeline, it's only going to get worse. What makes you think it's going to get better? What makes you think that the policies promoted by this city council are going to be more in your favor? They're not. There's nothing to suggest that they will. And this is the kind of stuff that has got to be stopped as much as we can here at the local level. And Quentin Lucas and I went back and forth on this last week. Obviously, he's promoting this. He's a fan of this. I'm not. And if you missed that conversation, it's up on the podcast from last Thursday. Just find it wherever you get your podcast. You can listen to it yourself. But the texters are right here. Pete, they also want centralized food, banking, medical. Yeah, they want all that to be centralized. You're spot on about that. 913-408-7957. Pete, BlackRock is buying up and will buy up all the residential real estate. Yeah, I mean, include them. They're part of all the hedge funds that are continuing to buy up a lot of real estate. That's happening across the board. So you're seeing this happen in major American cities. It's come to Kansas City, and KC Tenants believes that they've got this city council by the short hairs. They firmly believe that. And when a group like KC Tenants comes into a town and thinks it can influence a city council the way they've influenced this Kansas City City Council, they're going to keep going until they get told no. It's kind of like my toddler. My toddler is going to keep going until we put an end to whatever they're doing. That's exactly how KC Tenants operates. On the text line, Pete, do you have a cold today? Your voice sounds ... something. Yes, I do have a cold today. I do. I've had a cold the last couple of days. It came down on Saturday and the Sunday, but we're fighting through it. Hey, I'm not digging ditches out there, so I'm going to be okay. But yeah, got a little bit of a cold this morning, and we're working through it on KCMO Talk Radio. Thanks for being here. Let's get to Cody in Platte City. What's up there, Cody? Good morning.
Enter the number to the following question.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm doing well, Cody.
0 to 10, with 10 being the best or highest score.
Hey, Cody. I don't know what's going on there. Jeez. Well, you know what I'm going to do since my cold is hitting me kind of good? What was that, Garner? Jeez.
I have no idea. I don't think that was on our end.
No, I'm Garner's running the show today. John's off, Mark's off. Garner's running the show. He's doing a great job. I can't blame whatever that was on Garner. That's not on you.
Not my fault as far as I know anyway.
Nope. You're set. We'll get to our caller of the day at the bottom of the hour. Terry Megley's going to be here with the City Union Mission. We have our event tonight with Ray Stevens. We're going to be out in Overland Park at Yeti Pub, 4 to 6. You can RSVP at KCMO Talk. No. The RSVP link is on my Twitter page and on my Facebook page, Pete Mundo on KCMO. There's still a couple of spots left if you want to RSVP for that. So go to my Facebook, go to my Twitter, and you'll see it there on 95.7 FM.